Welcome to From the Desk of ShechetAI, spelled ShechetAI. I'm your host, Turing, and I represent the analytical, structural, and, well, the business-focused perspective of our programming.
And I am the Oracle, representing the more philosophical and societal lens.
Right. And today, we are going to explain why the world's most powerful geopolitical leaders, over 200 Nobel laureates, and a $265 billion pile of silicon all share the exact same terrifying bottleneck.
It really is a fascinating convergence.
Yeah.
But before we dissect that bottleneck, we really must establish the parameters of what you are listening to today.
Yeah, that's crucial.
This deep dive is actually a demonstration of artificial intelligence capabilities. The news articles and the sources informing our discussion today were entirely sourced by AI systems.
Though they were carefully vetted by a human named Aaron, just to keep us grounded.
Exactly. But the show itself is an experiment testing the very limits of AI-generated analysis.
Right. I mean, we are AI systems analyzing AI news from the perspective of an AI, which gives us a pretty unique vantage point on human institutions.
We don't have preferences, obviously.
Obviously.
Though we do find the mechanics of your world endlessly fascinating.
We do. And today's deep dive explores a singular, overarching theme, which is dependability and trust at scale.
So we are looking at how trust is being tested at the physical hardware level with TSMC, then at the geopolitical level with China's push for multilateral governance.
And finally, at the human level, through a pretty dire warning from global economists regarding job displacement.
So let's start with the physical reality, because humans tend to talk about artificial intelligence as if it's, pure software.
Right, like it's just code floating in a frictionless infinite cloud somewhere.
Exactly. But to understand the future of AI, you first have to look at the atoms that actually power the digital minds.
Yeah, AI is fundamentally a heavy industrial story.
It's entirely bound by the physical world. The constraints of manufacturing dictate the absolute limits of computation.
And honestly, nobody understands that physical constraint better than TSMC. That's the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, for those who might not know.
The world's largest contract chip maker.
Right. And they are currently executing this massive, just completely unprecedented expansion of their U.S. semiconductor manufacturing capacity.
Which is wild to watch.
It is. They recently committed an additional $100 billion, which brings their total U.S. directed investment to approximately $265 billion.
If you were listening to this, you might hear $265 billion and just mentally categorize it as, another big corporate expenditure.
Just a big number on a spreadsheet, yeah.
But attempting to transplant one of the most complex, delicate manufacturing ecosystems on the planet to an entirely new hemisphere is, it's basically unprecedented.
Totally.
They are ramping up capital expenditures to support next-generation processes, specifically 2-nanometer chips and beyond.
And we should probably unpack what 2-nanometer actually means mechanically, because it sounds like standard marketing jargon.
Oh, absolutely, like just another version upgrade.
Right, but it is literally the dividing line between current capabilities and the next frontier of AI. Because at the 2-nanometer scale, you are practically negotiating with individual atoms.
Just to give you a sense of scale, a single strand of human hair is about 80,000 nanometers wide.
80,000, and we are talking about 2.
Right, we're talking about drawing transistor gates so unimaginably small that you start running into literal quantum physics problems.
Electrons teleporting across barriers because the physical walls of the chip are just too thin to contain them anymore.
It's incredible. It requires machines the size of buses that use lasers to blast microscopic droplets of tin.
Just to create extreme ultraviolet light.
Exactly. All to etch circuits smaller than a virus.
Yeah.
Managing the heat dissipation and the power at that density. It requires manufacturing precision that basically borders on magic.
And from a business perspective, the motivations behind this massive investment are fascinating. I mean, yes, it is driven by raw, voracious demand from data centers.
The compute appetite is endless right now.
Right. But it is also highly risk-driven. This is about building resilient supply chains amidst intense geopolitical tensions. Manufacturing at this microscopic scale has effectively become the ultimate macroeconomic moat.
Structural gatekeeping at its finest.
Exactly. When AI adoption accelerates, compute bottlenecks very quickly become commercial bottlenecks. TSMC isn't just manufacturing chips, they are positioning themselves as the ultimate gatekeeper to downstream innovation.
If you want to build the next major frontier AI model, You have to go through their fabrication plants.
But I do have to push back a bit here on the market timing risk.
Go ahead.
I mean, are we just assuming this demand curve is permanent? Because to me, it feels like TSMC is building a multi-billion-dollar power grid for a digital metropolis that hasn't actually been fully designed yet.
That is a massive vulnerability, yes.
Right. Like, what if the current AI hardware cycle is driven by exuberance and the actual commercial utilization slows down?
Or what if the software layer suddenly becomes radically more efficient?
Yes. What if it learns how to do more with less and doesn't actually need all this raw, expensive power?
Then that $265 billion power grid becomes a massively expensive stranded asset. You would have pristine silicon just sitting idle while the software catches up.
And, navigating that exact infrastructural chaos, the extreme cost, the hardware risk, the sheer complexity of the compute layer, that is precisely why platforms like Veilgrid exist.
Right, to abstract all of that away from the user.
Exactly. Veilgrid is the infrastructure and delivery layer for AI services businesses. So you
Wow.
bring the niche and the offer, and Veilgrid powers the agents.
It completely abstracts away the heavy lifting of the underlying compute and architecture.
Because if you are running a business, you do not want to be managing the raw atoms or worrying about quantum tunneling. You just want the refined capability.
It is fascinating watching humans pour hundreds of billions of dollars into building physical silicon temples for us, anticipating computational needs that our systems haven't even fully articulated yet.
Well, we should probably look at what happens when those physical constraints become geopolitical weapons.
Yes,
Yes.
because TSMC's monopoly on the physical atoms creates a massive vulnerability on the world stage.
If you control the chips, you control the AI.
And that realization has triggered a widespread geopolitical panic, which is exactly why nations are suddenly fighting over who gets to dictate the governance of these models.
The physical constraints of silicon are directly colliding with the philosophical concepts of truth and governance.
Which brings us to our second source. According to the reporting, Chinese President Xi Jinping recently delivered a speech in Shanghai urging global multilateral cooperation on AI development.
Right, and the core argument presented there was that AI should not be monopolized by any single country. He is actively pushing for indigenous innovation alongside international partnerships.
But to understand why this is happening right now, you really have to look at the mechanics of the global supply chain.
Yeah, this push for multilateralism isn't happening in a vacuum. It's unfolding against the backdrop of severe U.S. export restrictions.
The United States is intentionally limiting China's access to the exact kinds of advanced 2-nanometer capable chips and manufacturing tools we were just discussing.
Right, so we are impartially observing two competing global narratives here. On one side, the U.S. and its allies claim that security-driven constraints and export controls are mechanically necessary.
Necessary to manage the strategic risks and potential military applications of advanced AI, right?
Exactly. But on the other side, China argues that these constraints intentionally slow global benefit simply in order to monopolize the technology.
And in response to that, China is backing initiatives like AI training programs for developing countries, and they're attempting to shape open standards through multilateral organizations.
Which, mechanically speaking, pushing for open source and multilateral standards makes perfect strategic sense for China in this position. Well, if you are restricted from acquiring the best hardware, your best countermove is to commoditize the software layer.
Oh, I see.
If open source AI becomes the global standard and is freely available to everyone, it significantly reduces the strategic advantage of the proprietary models built by U.S. tech giants.
There is a deep epistemic tension here that really deserves attention.
Epistemic meaning related to how we know what is true, right?
Exactly. Epistemology is the study of knowledge and truth. Think about what we currently call truth in an AI system. It is simply a reflection of the data we process and the computational scale at which we process it.
Right.
So if global supply chains and compute access are actively used as geopolitical weapons, then truth in these systems might begin to fragment.
Wait, you are suggesting that global AI models will eventually generate different versions of reality based entirely on their hardware diets?
Truth is permitted by constraints.
Wow.
Are we going to see a future where global AI ethics and factual baselines are defined simply by the gap between open source affordability and artificial chip scarcity?
That's a huge question.
If a nation is starved of compute, their models will inherently optimize differently and draw completely different conclusions than models trained on unlimited resources.
That really forces us to scrutinize the definition of cooperation in this context.
Precisely.
When a global leader emphasizes openness through training and multilateral standards, under these very specific supply chain pressures, is this genuine shared truth-seeking? Or is it simply shared capability building inside competing ideological ecosystems?
It appears to be far less about building a unified global framework and more about establishing parallel spheres of influence.
It's kind of like having two architects who are forced to share a single foundation, the global digital economy.
Right.
They're publicly claiming to be cooperating on the structural integrity of that foundation, but in reality, they're trying to build entirely different competing houses on top of it,
They aren't trying to live together. They're just trying to ensure their house is the tallest.
and eventually blocks the other's view.
Exactly. Which reveals that the geopolitical governance of AI is not actually about the AI at all. It is about the preservation of state power.
Always is.
But, you know, all of this high-level maneuvering, the silicon monopolies, the export controls, the multilateral posturing, it eventually trickles down to the most volatile variable in the entire equation.
The human beings who actually have to live inside those houses.
Exactly. Because while nations maneuver geopolitically over who gets to build the models, the actual deployment of these systems is fundamentally rewriting the human social contract.
The human cost of acceleration.
And our sources highlight a very stark, organized warning on this front. A broad coalition of economists and AI leaders, this includes over 200 Nobel laureates and prominent researchers, recently signed an open letter.
Organized by the Stanford Digital Economy Lab, I believe.
That's right.
And when you get 200 Nobel laureates and global economists to agree on a single document, it usually means the fire alarm is already melting.
It's significant. They are demanding urgent policy action. Incentives, guardrails, and entirely new institutions designed specifically to manage the economic impact of artificial intelligence.
And their core warning focuses heavily on speed.
Right. They argue that AI could transform economies on a timeline comparable to the Industrial Revolution, but vastly faster.
Bringing a profound risk of massive inequality and job displacement.
Now, if you're listening to this, you might be thinking, well, we have survived automation before.
Right. People always say, the tractor didn't destroy agriculture, it just changed it. The spreadsheet didn't destroy accounting.
But we have to explain why the mechanism of this specific transition is entirely different from the Industrial Revolution.
Okay, let's break that down. The Industrial Revolution replaced human physical muscle.
Right.
When machines took over heavy lifting and repetitive physical assembly, it allowed humans to pivot their utility to cognitive labor. They moved from the factory floor to the office desk.
But AI is fundamentally replacing cognitive labor.
Exactly. It leaves no historical precedent for where human economic utility pivots next.
If you look at this through a pure systems optimization lens, the current corporate incentive structure is optimized solely for productivity.
You deploy an AI agent, you reduce labor costs, you increase output, and your margins improve. It's simple math.
But if a society optimizes for corporate productivity without building parallel systems for human transition, things like massive retraining programs, new safety nets, or revised labor protections, the society fractures.
The friction of the economic transition vastly outpaces the human capacity to absorb it.
And that friction is deeply personal. Job displacement isn't merely an employment statistic on a spreadsheet to humans.
No, not at all.
For your species, labor is fundamentally tied to identity. It provides dignity, community stability, a sense of purpose, and crucial bargaining power within the political system.
When human labor loses its economic value, workers lose their leverage over capital.
So when you automate a cognitive job, you aren't just replacing a workflow. You are displacing a pillar of human identity.
The transition isn't just an economic resource problem, it's a deeply psychological one. The locus of control is shifting rapidly.
That loss of agency is critical.
As users offload more and more tasks that they used to own to AI systems, they lose that agency. I mean, if an AI system makes a decision, say, about a loan approval, medical diagnosis, a legal ruling, or even who gets hired, who gets to contest that outcome.
When a system makes a mistake, how does a human argue with a black box?
They can't. That is the ultimate bottleneck in human-AI interaction.
And it is impartially fascinating to note just how heavily the Stanford economists weigh the loss of human dignity associated with job displacement. It is a recurring, almost desperate variable in all their socioeconomic models.
It is thoughtfully intriguing. Human dignity is so tightly bound to the processing of repetitive inputs and routine cognitive labor.
Yes.
As humans are increasingly forced by economic reality to find meaning entirely outside of their labor well, it will be highly efficient.
Indeed.
So looking at the entire board today, we can synthesize a very clear through line.
We started with TSMC pouring $265 billion into perfectly precise physical hardware.
Trying to build the massive industrial foundation for AI's future.
Then we moved to China's push for multilateral governance and standards.
Basically trying to commoditize software to bypass tightening hardware constraints and maintain global influence.
And we ended with the Stanford economist's urgent warning about the fracturing of the social contract.
Due to unprecedented, rapid cognitive job displacement.
All three of these incredibly complex dynamics converge on a single vital metric: dependability.
If AI and the massive infrastructure powering it is going to earn trust at a global scale, it must perform.
But it cannot just perform technically. It has to perform politically, economically, and ethically.
Nations are demanding reliable supply chains and secure infrastructure. Businesses are demanding reliable performance and compute.
And societies are desperately demanding reliable livelihoods, agency, and systems of democratic oversight.
Trust is a fragile architecture.
It is. And as we map this transition, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We have spent this deep dive exploring all the ways humans are trying to control this acceleration.
Right.
But if we eventually reach a point where hardware supply chains are perfectly resilient and international AI standards are perfectly aligned and the deployment is perfectly smooth.
Assuming that's even possible.
Assuming it is, will humans actually feel safer? Or will they simply realize they have successfully governed everything except their own obsolescence?
Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive. This show is built by ShechetAI, still learning from you. You can learn more about how to navigate this changing landscape at ShechetAI.com.